Hey everyone, it's Vanessa Callahan, and I'm so excited to welcome you to the Calm, Empowered Parent podcast. Together, let's challenge the idea that parenting has to be perfect. We know that there is no one-size-fits-all approach to raising children, and while love is the key, it sure helps to have the right tools for the job. Raising resilient humans is intensely personal and even transformative work, and I'm here for it. Let's laugh, cry, heal, and learn together. Here we go. All right, so we are resilient parents raising resilient children, and we're kicking off our session with a question from Sterling, who asks, my 6-year-old daughter has been having emotional outbursts, including hitting, throwing, and crying. How can I support her through the outbursts and help to minimize them? So such a good question, because I don't know about you, but what I've seen for most of our parents and, clients and folks and even teachers and care providers is that when our kids are having big emotional outbursts, especially when it involves something that's physical, like some physical aggression, you mentioned hitting and throwing. For others, it's biting or destroying things. For others, it's hair pulling or shoving, slamming doors, right? Those kinds of things. It can bring up a lot of emotion for us. So the first thing we want to do is make sure that however this is affecting our nervous system, that we've got a handle on that. And so it goes a little bit beyond just calm down, but really that is the essence of it. And the reason I say it goes beyond that is that we each have sort of different keys that unlock our calm and certain tools and strategies that are just going to work better for us. And also the same is true for our children. There are certain tools and strategies that will work better for each of our children. And even through the ages and stages, that can change. So one of the things I always encourage you to do is to kind of reframe it as this is out of control. We need to get it back into control, or this is bad behavior, right? And versus good behavior, or, instead of being mean, you need to be nice. Instead of being out of control, you need to be perfectly calm. It's just setting up a little bit too much of like a binary, and it makes it so that it's difficult to reach the goal. Like, for example, we talk a lot about kids who are maybe having conflicts with their siblings and are not being very nice and are maybe being mean to each other and not solving their problems effectively. Well, even just reframing it to not solving problems effectively instead of they're crazy and they get into all these fights. But we want to get a layer below that and then a layer below that and understanding what's happening. And also scaffolding for them. This is a principle that my clients always hear about, which is that we start where they are and then we slowly scooch them to our goal. So to ask two kids from being mean to each other to being nice to each other, that's a big leap. I mean, think of the last time that you had an impulse to be mean to someone. Maybe it was your kid because they were pushing you to that limit, or maybe it was someone who cut you off in traffic. Maybe it was somebody that's, close to you in your workplace or your family, and you had this impulse to be mean. And then imagine a voice coming in being like, now be nice. I don't know about you, but my reaction would be like, mind your own business at the very least, maybe something stronger. What we want to come back to is, hey, you want to be mean to them, but what's the message that really needs to get across here? Or what do you need in order to get yourself back to your baseline or put your lid back on, cool down, so that you can effectively communicate what you need or what you want out of this situation? And maybe sometimes what you need and want is just to let it go. Like that person cuts you off in traffic. Are you really going to chase them down in hot pursuit and yell at them and gesture at them? Is that really what you truly want to do with your time and energy? Maybe, but let's take a moment and actually take a beat and see and check. And maybe there's a scaffolding where, okay, I do want to honk at them, but I'm going to let it go after that. I'm not going to actually chase them, or I'm going to complain and take some breaths, let it out. And then I'll move on. So some scaffolding there. So you've got a few ideas here. Finding the tool that helps you and your family, each of you, your go-tos for calming down. And there's a whole process that I love leading families through to discover your best calm down strategies as a family. If you'd like a sense of that, you can go to my website, www.thecalmempoweredparent.com, which has also all the information about the podcast. And at the top, there's a way to get a free guide on my six go-to calm down strategies, where each family member should find something on that list. Like, so far, so good. Everybody has found something on that list that works for every family member. And it does help to go through the process like I lead my clients through, where you test out each one for a period of time, whether they like it right away or not, and you have it in the environment, which includes you. So, for example, you could for a week try out different breathing strategies, and then for another week try out different somatic strategies. Another week, maybe lightening it up and bring in some silliness and some goofiness to break up the tension. See what lands well with your kid. So, like, for example, I have a family in my year-long program who know that they know that humor and lightening up really works for their son, but their daughter really doesn't like it. Same thing is true though for their daughter. Their daughter really likes the breathing tools, things like the roller coaster breath, where you breathe in and out as you trace your fingers, and the smell the flower, blow out the candle. She really likes those, but their son can't stand them. And imagine if they said, we have to use the breathing tools. Who would they be leaving out? Their son, right? Or they're like, oh, we have to always use humor. Who would they be leaving out? Their daughter. So knowing that it could be different for each family member is sometimes like the key that unlocks the kind of the treasure chest here of self-regulation tools and staying connected. So all of these pieces are important in the moment. Now, another thing I want to say though, is that we also need to make sure that we are taking care of the things that surround these big episodes as much as possible to be proactive. Some of my favorite tools are going through the routines and making them as robust as possible, involving the kids as much as possible. That's something I teach in my year-long program, first month of the semester, twice a year for a reason, and even give school workshops on this topic. Because when you develop a robust routine, that it's robust because it runs even if you're not there, that they practically run themselves. And you use things like intrinsic motivation, like the kids sort of flexing their competence and their curiosity to sort of try out different iterations of the routine and be involved in that, that can smooth out a lot of these episodes to begin with. You know, like imagine if you weren't giving as many reminders, or they weren't feeling interrupted, or they were naturally intrinsically motivated to do things. Oftentimes that settles down and can maybe, you know, take these episodes down to half as long, half as often, and half as intense. That's what we hope for. Another one is to get really clear on the expectations. And one of the best ways to do that is to make sure that you yourself are really clear. Like, why do the boundaries, limits, and rules exist? And how are we going to describe them in a way that actually inspires the kids to want to meet those expectations? That's a whole nother piece. And then last but not least, knowing how to be the best lid detector possible, where you can see like catching it even early when there are signs of maybe they're hungry, they're lonely, they're angry already, they're tired, but they haven't quite blown their lid yet. And a lot of parents who come to me say, you don't understand, I have a kid that's like 0 to 60, 0 to 100 in seconds. And I said, yes, that's probably true. They probably have like kind of what we would call like a quick temper, or I like to say a quick lid. It just pops off. And there are certain factors, signs, and patterns that we can identify, and even tells. Like think of tells in a poker game that someone's bluffing. There are certain tells that the tension is starting to rise, that their lid is starting to pop, is the pressure, it's almost getting pressurized, and that their lid's going to pop soon. When you become more attuned to those tells and you also do all these proactive things, you can do better than half, right? You can go bring down the frequency, the intensity, and the duration of these episodes down to like a quarter, a fifth, or even a sixth, or even a tenth as frequent. Now, what I would say to Sterling and other folks who want to know about this is that you should take a really organized approach for at least 3 months. And I mean organized, right? Like you might even be in a program or working with a coach, or you sit down with your co-parent and you make a plan of the coping tools you're going to be trying, the routines you're going to be, you know, cleaning up and improving, the expectations that you're going to get really clear on, and also the lid detecting piece that I mentioned. And you do that for at least 3 months. I mean, that's what the first 3 months of my program looks like, for example, before you decide that there's something clinically wrong with your child. Because what we want to see is we want data, right? We want to know, is this something like, is my child impacted and supported through intervention? And if we do see the frequency, the duration, and the intensity of these episodes reduce over time, then we have some data to work with and say, oh, we could probably continue rolling forward with this, maybe another 3 months, and then at 6 months, check in again, another 3 months, 9 months. And then by 12 months, by the year, that's why I do a year-long program, by the way, we should have a really good map of what each of the kids need around their emotions, around motivation, etc. Their routines, expectations, even how they deal with conflicts, their love languages, the ways they like to appreciate, express appreciation, like all these, their character strengths, all these pieces together. And if at the end of that, or even like halfway through, we're not seeing much improvement, then we need to get clinically curious and say, is there something going on here that's beyond my child's control and beyond the environment's influence? And that might mean, getting them support like play therapy, right? Or other kind of assessments to see, like, maybe this is an occupational therapy thing. Maybe there's a speech language thing. And then we can find out. But what I don't want you to do is kind of sprinkle in ideas here and there and continue being stressed. Please don't do that. There are plenty of like paths to smoothing things out, and really consider the frequency, the duration, and the intensity of these episodes, and pay attention to whether you're making progress with what you're trying, and be open to trying new things or even getting support if your own kind of homegrown interventions aren't making enough of an impact for you to feel really confident that your child has what they need around these episodes and that you have what you need around these episodes. It's no easy task raising a child who has big emotions. I was a big emotion kid. I've had so many kids with big emotions that you could even consider like maybe highly sensitive and or difficulty with self-regulation. Their EQ has a ways to go. It's a lot of work, and so rewarding though when you see a child make progress in this area. They have this sense of like self-mastery. They also are less upset about being upset over time. They're also more effective with their friendships because they're less likely to get upset and be physical at their friends. They end up doing better in school as they move into kindergarten, first grade, second grade, because they're able to pay attention and spend more energy instead of like coping with their, dysregulation with the actual learning, because a dysregulated brain doesn't learn very well. So we want to pay attention to this, especially as they head into the more academic years. My child has started exhibiting some really challenging behaviors, and my husband and I are at our wits' end. We're struggling to find common ground on how to discipline our son. How can we get on the same page as parents? This is from Danielle, who has a 7-month-old baby and a 2.5-year-old. So when kids start to turn this corner into solid toddlerhood, 2.5, starting to transition even into preschool, early preschool age, we start to see them try and assert their independence in ways that perhaps we haven't encountered yet. The early months and even year to year and a half, even 2 years, it's a lot more about bonding and establishing that our needs are going to be met directly from our caregivers. However, when they're transitioning to this stronger independent phase, the kids are going to be wanting to really test out no and see what no does. They're also going to be exhibiting bigger emotions at times because they're having to cope with coming to terms with the fact that they can't have everything they want, when they want it, how they want it now, usually. And if we think for a moment, and I recommend everyone to do this, to really empathize with the fact that these young humans, these young people, these very tiny folks are dealing with some very basic things about how things work. And they have such a limited life experience. And even that phrase, limited life experience, I used to repeat to myself when I was working with my youngest preschoolers, 2.5, 3.5. And just to remind myself that they're still figuring a lot of things out. So they don't always understand and have the context for how big of an upset matches the actual situation. So like my clothing didn't come off the first time I tried, and now they're having a full-blown tantrum in the middle of trying to get undressed to get dressed. And you're like, buddy, it's just a normal routine. But for them, it's sort of this forever moment that they're experiencing. Also, we have to understand that the upset brain is really limited in its capacity to do things like recall past experiences and logically think things through. Upset brain and young brain doesn't have a good sense of time or consequence, and often feels betrayed. So when this is all happening, of course, we can put those in the bucket of challenging behaviors. And it can manifest in a lot of different ways. It can just be refusal, it can be yelling, it can be screaming and shouting at you, it can be starting to, even throw things, the tantruming type of things, kicking, hitting, etc., biting, even scratching, destroying things. And that's because, anger is very activating, and they are in some ways justifiably irritated to angry, because in their mind, if they can think it, then it should be so. Oh, I feel like having more stories. And it's like, well, but the clock says, unfortunately, it's time for us to go to bed. And they're like, I don't care about the clock. I just want what I want. So I have to break it to every parent of a toddler and early preschooler that it is part of our job sometimes to basically update our children's perception database on how things work and help them create and build more life experience. And we do that by giving them what I like to call a reasonable response from the environment, where, with love, with firmness, with kindness, all of those combined, we support them with the emotions that come up and not make those wrong, and help them understand that some things are the way they need to be. Like, for example, the can't pause time. Oh, we wish we could stop the clock and just read as long as we wanted to. Unfortunately, that's not how time works. And that's not how bodies work. Like, we need to get our rest. So we do need to wrap up. And this is our last book. And being able to gently and firmly and calmly help them understand how things work. And when I frame things that way, rather than good behavior, bad behavior, it really helps me to stay more in that zone of growth and development with the young ones. And also knowing that just because a child is upset doesn't mean you're doing it wrong. I think that's really important, because at these early years, often upset is even sometimes a symptom of learning a hard lesson, and even of stretching into an area of growth where, perhaps they would be even kind of delayed in that area if we were to, like, for example, give in to their demands when they're tantruming, or not stick to bedtime and do make it their will that bedtime can be extended just because they're in a mood. So there's some ways that we can deliver this that is so calm and kind that I love helping parents with. And that's something I would be pointing you towards first, is wrapping your head around these perspectives. And when you're trying to find common ground on the same page as parents, usually want to point to the same north. In other words, like, what is our goal ultimately? And here, the one I'm suggesting or offering to you is growth, right? We want our child to learn, and we also want them to learn at a developmental pace that's appropriate. And if this is your first time parenting a toddler, it can be hard to know what is that level of expectation that is fair and that your child could actually have some success in reaching. And that takes some trial and error, but there are also some sort of developmental norms that you can aim towards first. And that's where someone like me, or my coaches on my team could be really helpful, or someone in your world who's an expert and has had some time with this age group and can give you a sense of that. You can even go to your child's teacher or care provider if they are having good luck with your child. Another thing I can say is going through an inventory. So, like, my program has 7 pillars, and I walk the parents through those 7 pillars. And over time, you basically get an inventory of all the things that are working and not working across a lot of different topics, like how things that work to motivate, things that don't work to motivate your child, things that work to soothe them, things that don't work to soothe them, things that when we do them proactively seem to help prevent power struggles and upsets in the first place, ways that we connect, and so that the child just feels more plugged in, and we all feel more on the same page because we're in a groove or in a flow as a family, for example. And these are things I always bring to parents, whether it's in a workshop or in one of my retreats for clients or in my year-long program, because if you haven't had a chance to take like an organized approach, like, this is even how my quiz is built, which you can find on my website. If you take an organized approach, it sort of settles your nervous system so that you don't feel like you're just sort of stabbing at it or like kind of patching things together. There's an actual rhythm through that you can walk through of like inventory processes, trying this for 2 weeks and then seeing how it goes, trying the other thing for 2 weeks, seeing how that goes. And what I found is across 6 months to a year, that can be an incredible way to create a foundation. And that's why my program's called Foundations, Family Foundations Immersion, because it is creating a foundation that you can build off of. All right, so this is from a mom who has a 7-year-old who experiences a lot of feelings of shame and wants to help him overcome those feelings. Her name is Liron or Lyron. Really good to have your question on a specific emotion. Really like these. Helps me get a picture of what might be going on for your child. When a 7-year-old is experiencing shame, oftentimes has to do with embarrassment and a sense of, I don't know if I belong anymore. Like if my behavior has pushed me out of a lovable category into an unlovable category. And that's why shame is a lot heavier than embarrassment and can last longer and have a deeper impact on a child's sense of self and sense of worth and sense of value in a family. So when you see this happening, I'm really glad that you're paying attention. First of all, good job putting a name to it and getting curious about it. That's going to do a lot for your child. They need that from you. And what I want to say, first of all, is you can be very reassuring, but don't expect it to resolve in a single conversation. This is really important. Because I think of like when I've noticed kids who experience shame, think of it as like a heavy cloud, and it takes some time for the sunshine to like burn up and evaporate the cloud, like for the cloud to lift and clear and for the sunshine to get through. So be patient with your comfort with a child who's experiencing shame and try not to rush them. So what I mean is like if you think of it as like a ladder they need to climb, or like let's go back to the cloud analogy, like the clouds need to burn off. The first layer that needs to burn off is I'm here and it's okay that you have this feeling, right? And I'm here to listen. And because you feel this way doesn't mean that I'm going away, right? Like I'm going to stay close to you. I'm also not going to push you to feel differently yet. I'm just going to hear and I'm listening, and you can just let them know that you're so glad that they told you. So glad they told you, or they're so glad that they're letting you sit with them, or it's really good to be with them. Like it can be that basic. Okay. First layer. When you feel them settling into the fact that you really are there and you really are caring and comforting, then you might go into a layer deeper and share an observation. It's a really neutral thing usually. So it's like, I noticed that when this happened, you did these things. So it's like, I noticed that when mom and dad gave you some feedback about, how you've been treating your sister lately, I noticed that your body kind of got heavy and you put your head down and your cheeks got red, and then you didn't want to talk anymore for the rest of the night. And then you can ask, like what was going on for you, and see if they'll open up to you. If they're not ready to open up yet, that's okay. You can tell them that it's okay if you don't want to talk about it yet. I just want you to know that, and this is where you can reassure them that it's okay to have that feeling. Maybe it's a little bit of embarrassment, maybe a little shame. And you don't have to stay there. You don't have to stay stuck in it. I'm here for you. And even no matter how you behave, even if I don't like your behavior, and we can say we, if there's another caregiver in this example I've given, it's a mom and a dad, we still love you. We love you very much. And you can even name a few things that you're proud of them for. I'm really proud of you for being brave and, sticking up for yourself with your sister. I'm really proud that you are, even sitting here with me and having this and sitting with this difficult emotion, this difficult feeling. That takes a lot of courage. Let them quiet, just be with them. And maybe they'll seek a little snuggle or a little comfort. Let you hug them, let you put your arm around them. Maybe they'll even just like, put their head on your shoulder. I've seen that with my stepdaughter back in the day. And they're just feeling like, oh, you got me. And sometimes the hug is like not like a squeeze hug. It's like a hold me while I just feel held up. And when you feel that, that's a good sign. That means they're allowing themselves to be vulnerable with you, to be seen. This is all very healthy. Next layer might look like bringing in some of the sunshine and maybe troubling some of the deeper fears or feelings around it. All siblings fight. All siblings have disagreements. It doesn't make either of you good or bad, right or wrong necessarily. Siblings have to work it out. And sometimes it's easy, sometimes it's hard. Sometimes one of you gets in trouble, sometimes the other one gets in trouble. And we understand that, and we love both of you equally. And we know that in this case, we came down pretty hard on you, but that's also because we were seeing something we didn't like and we really need to address it eventually. Right now, I want to make sure you feel okay, and we will have that talk. And then maybe you can take some responsibility for the way you said something. I didn't mean to, or like I didn't mean to. Maybe it's like next time I'll really think about how much it impacts you when we give you feedback in front of your sibling. That seemed to really not work for you. If we give you feedback, we need to do it in a more constructive or kind way. so that, it doesn't feel like we're just embarrassing you in front of your sibling as a punishment. That's not what we're after here. We just want everyone to learn from these conflicts, right? So you've got these layers you're moving through. And eventually, though, you want them to know that even when they make mistakes, even, especially when they make mistakes, they're very lovable, because they're being a human, they're trying things, they're taking risks, there's something that about their personality that's still just developing. Maybe they're trying on something, some attitude, some instigation, some provocateur kind of role, whatever it is. Maybe it's lying, it's cheating, it's stealing. Like, we've seen all of it in our coaching. My gosh, in all my years in the classroom and step parenting, seen it all. So that's normal. We're here for it. And we're going to get through this together. And I'm going to clean up my side of the street as a caregiver to make sure that I'm not being unduly harsh or shaming. And we're going to find a way through this where, you understand the lesson that you need to learn here, and maybe some replacement behavior, some other ways of getting your needs met, other ways of getting a rise out of your sister that are fun, other ways of getting your sister to listen to you that are safe and aren't so harsh, right? Etc. And guess what? You're modeling for your child how to do that for other people, right? So instead of, when you see somebody starting to feel sad and embarrassed, instead of teasing them more or giving them a harder time, you recognize that you've gone too far, and you pull back and you take care of them and you reassure them. What a great skill. So we're going to really set them up for a lot of social and emotional success in their future relationships with friends, future romantic partners, coworkers. Like, that's the kind of person I would want to hang out with more. So let's keep that ball rolling in their young years. And I think also we want to see our kids feel a little embarrassed if they really make a mistake, because it helps them sort of go, oh, shoot, I did something wrong, and maybe course correct and self-evaluate a little bit and be a little bit motivated to be better. But shame is shifting into this other place that can have a longer lasting effect on their self-esteem and self-worth. And so if you're really seeing that in your child or children, please make sure you're signaling to other caregivers that there's this area that we're working on, and we're doing it in a very kind and affirming way that's really supportive and forgiving and understanding, even while it's being firm. But we're just like staying away from anything that could be like comparison to others, publicly shaming them or embarrassing them, telling them that you'll tell on them to a lot of people, or how's that going to look to other people. Like, those kinds of things we're going to put on the shelf right now. It's too heavy-handed. Susanna asks, how can we manage sibling rivalry calmly and set routines that work for everyone in the family? Oh, I like this one so much. So we also dedicate 2 months of our year-long program. It's a module that we do twice about sibling rivalry, conflict resolution skills, and repair. What to do when we disagree, what to do when we're not getting what we need from somebody or something, what to do when we're frustrated and emotions are running high in an interaction, what to do when we've established our boundaries and those boundaries aren't being respected. These are all things we cover. And there are some particular tools that I found be incredibly effective for kids, and so much so that they end up wanting to use them themselves without our help, and then even want to teach others. To me, that's always a sign like that not only have I helped these kids get to mastery level, but there's enough sort of intrinsic motivation and value in the tools for them to actually share with others. So what I would start with sibling rivalry is to make sure that they have a way of identifying when they need to kind of go to their corners and kind of call it quits on this conversation, this interaction, and take some space. So help them like notice when things are starting to go too far. And that's going to be different for every sibling pair and every age. At teenage years, if they start to resort to name calling, that might be your flag, right? But in toddlers and preschoolers, it might be when things start to get physical and their cheeks start to get red and their fists are getting really tight and everything in between. So, because they're about to start using their hands and their feet, right, instead of their words. So having that awareness around their emotional reaction to the conflict and when it's time to take a break, and what I call, like, using Dr. Daniel Siegel's brain in the palm of the hand model to put their lids back on, and you choose a coping tool before they return. So like they're escalating, their lids are coming off. And then finally one person's like, I need to go calm down, or I need a break, right? And then say, let's try again later, right? And then they go and they put their lid back on, and that gives hopefully the person that didn't think of that first to also get the prompt, the cue of, right, I need to go regulate myself too before we can come back. This, by the way, is a really useful skill for adults. If you have not yet mastered the skill of self-awareness around when your emotions are running too high, and it's actually better to take a break from a conversation. And, in a lot of marriage and family therapy and in a lot of brain research has determined that 20 minutes to cool down is usually, on average, a pretty good amount to be able to at least get your brain working in integrated, smooth fashion again, so that you have access to things like your memories and some perspective on like time and consequence and other things that are not available or very hard to reach when your lid's off, when you're flooded, for example. So coming back to the question about siblings, having an ability and also a way for whoever is assisting them, whatever caregiver, whether that's a teacher, a nanny, a parent, yourself, the person who asked this question, having a way to intervene that you've agreed upon ahead of time. Okay, when I see the two of you getting to that place, first I'm going to just, check in. This is my favorite one. Hey, are we still having fun? Everybody okay? Right? And then the agreement would be that if I can read that things are getting too far, or lids are about to pop all the way off, I have a way of getting involved. And that can look like something nonverbal. I've done this with 2 kids who were in a love-hate relationship where they couldn't stay away from each other. And then they would often, when they were together, they would fight and at the very least highly distract each other because they were a little obsessive about their friendship. There have been many pairs like this over my 15 years of teaching. And I ended up coming up with a hand signal that worked for several of them, which I would just say their names, get their attention, right? Make sure I have their full attention. And I'll go like this, which just meant time to take a break, right? It was so much better than coming over and, because we had reached that point. But if you're not there yet, please don't skip the steps of meaningfully involving yourself a few times before you then say, I have the authority to separate you two, and say it's time to take a break. So how can you meaningfully involve yourself? You can go in there and you can physically make some space between 2 kids who are about to go at it. That's important. Just put your body in between them and say, hey, friends, what's happening, right? Is everybody okay, right? Is everybody still having fun? Another thing you can do to meaningfully involve yourself could be to ask one of them to come to you and just ask them to kind of basically report what's happening, and then ask how they feel about it and why they feel that way. So you're like building towards, by the way, an I statement. So you're building towards this, being able to calm down, like have the awareness that they need to take the space to cool their jets enough to be able to come back meaningfully. And one of the ways you can do that is bringing a kid over and interviewing them a bit around like what happened and, like, how did that feel? And why did it feel that way? And then also maybe, is there something that you think you need right now? Like what's your ask that might come after an I statement? And that's like the building blocks of helping the kids be able to solve their problems. Now for teenagers and middle schoolers, like kids and tweens and teens, they're a little bit past just saying, use an I statement, or, hey, it's like, maybe you should take a break. Oftentimes they need you to get it and like really get it. Like sometimes just say, tell me more. What else sucks about this? What else is painful about this? What else did they do that annoys you? How long has this been going on? And like, let them like get their full story out before you make any suggestions. Top tip. Okay. As they get older. And really that starts around age 9, because I've definitely stepped in it with a 9-year-old by giving suggestions too quickly. And then like eye rolling at me. Oh, you don't get it. So coming back to the making sure that you get it part, you might ask for them to really share with you. I recently just got a text from one of my clients who had been feeling like this aggravation coming from her son, and really the conflict was between the 2 of them. But he was kind of like having this generalized like kind of like conflict with life, like nothing was feeling quite right, because and they were in this big life transition, so understandably he had a lot on his chest. And I said, do this, try this, set a timer for like as long as you think you can handle. So I think she ended up doing 5 to 10 minutes, something like that. And she just let him have a cathartic, like share. Okay, what else is bothering you? Say their piece, and you might hear things you don't like they're being really judgmental, or they're playing the victim role, or they're blowing this out of proportion and it doesn't match, right? Like they're exaggerating, or they're using this superlatives like always, never, or like the best, the worst, right? Let them do it. Let them share it. Let them get it out. And then see if like you can help them put that lid on and get to like the core thing that they want to express and the core thing that they need from the situation or in this moment. Okay. When you do that and you do this groundwork, kids get along better. Okay. They do. And I've seen it times 24 kids at a time in a classroom, sometimes 36, even 48 children. And then you can also establish a conflict resolution process. And that can include effective apologies, running through problem solving suggestions, making agreement for now, and then checking in about how that agreement's going. So there is a restorative process. And sometimes there can be like a great need for repair. What's the best way to navigate the journey of tweens wanting to fit in above all else? This comes from Alicia. Alicia, I really appreciate this. I like your language around fitting in because I think it's very accurate for what tweens are up to. So they're trying to figure out their identity outside of the family unit. So we have to understand that and embrace that that is their work right now. That's the work of their developmental stage. Where do I fit in outside of my family unit? What is my identity separate from my family unit? So we call it individuation. So then first they're individuating when they're much younger as a physically sovereign person, right? I do, right? Toddlers, early preschoolers. And then they're like, what does this world do? And what can it do for me? And that's really preschool, 3 to 6. 6 to 9, they're like, how can I participate meaningfully in my culture, right? Like whether that's how my classroom runs, how the play goes with my friends, or what the theme of the month is, and our food at home, or whatever it is. They really love to have input into how things are going. And then right around 9, they're like, I'm my own man. I'm my own woman. They really have this sort of like swagger about them where they can have a little bit more of that smirk on their face, a little more smug, a little more entertained by their own wit. They can like sit back from the family dynamic and want to be kind of doing their own thing, like not their own thing because they're so just in their bubble and immersed in it, but because they really want to have a separate identity from the family. So why are they trying to fit in with other tweens? Well, they are trying to fit in with other versions of what it can be to be like 11 and 12, right? And try that on. And especially if it's in contrast to something that, their younger sibling is up to. And I've had kids go to school for like even just a month and come back and be like, I don't play Pokemon anymore, to their siblings. I've only played Magic the Gathering. Like, why? What happened? But it's actually really healthy and important for the kids to branch out. And you notice that's still a card game. It's still social. It's still off screens. So, and they have this group of friends they're playing with. And now they're like trying to get all the decks, and they're putting pressure on you. That's the part we don't like. But really, it's a pretty healthy step into a version of individuation that is within the realm of, things we can get on board with. When it's tricky is when they're trying to fit in a way that is counter to their own well-being, right? Kind of encouraging them to take on a less sort of synergistic or aligned personality quality, right? Like being snarky or pretending you don't care about things you do care about, kind of these like playing cool kind of personality traits. And I think giving them a reasonable response from the environment that's not overly anxious, please. Not being like, oh no, you're turning into a horrible person, right? And we freak out and like come down on them really hard might actually push them further into that space where it's like, I don't care. Why do you care so much, right? Because you see the contrast, it's like too stark. So what I would say is care, but not too much. And just like have a reasonable response of like, wow, you're saying things that are pretty hurtful right now, and it's not that fun to be around. And say, like, if this continues, we're gonna like really need to talk about it, honey. And then give them some space to just let that land. Don't try and convince them that they should not spend time with these friends or not be this person they're trying on. It might give them more to push back on. And when you push on someone's hand in a workshop, I've done it before, that you say, put up your hand, you put your hand on their hand, and you give a little tension to push. They 9 times out of 10, they'll push back to hold their ground. So don't give them something to like hold their ground about really intensely, but do give them some honest, heartfelt feedback. And you can also let them know that you see what they're up to. You know, hey, I get it. When I was your age, or even you don't have to say that, you can say, it's always interesting to try new things, and it seems like you're kind of trying on this attitude, you're kind of trying on this way of talking, or you're getting into some new things. Cool, I get that. That's great. That you're exploring, and I want you to do that. And it's like the yes and game. And I do have to say that some of the things that you're saying and doing, like, try to be more objective, right? Like when you say this to your sister and just tell them that Pokemon is dumb now, whatever it is that you are worried, like that is bringing up the worry or the concern. Or like when I see you not taking showers anymore, because that's what a couple of your friends are doing, like it does bring up concerns for me. And it's my job to tell you what those are. And if we need to have a more serious conversation about it, we can. But right now, I just like you to know what's on my mind about it, and some food for thought. Yeah. But let a few things go. This is a disorganized time. Like they're like toddlers in the amount of reorganization that's happening in their brain. Like synapses are dying and being reconnected at an incredibly fast pace. And that's why they're moody. They need more sleep. They need more food. Some days they don't even seem like themselves, and other days they'll just be super emotional. They'll just cry a lot. So if those things are happening, just know that there's a lot of hormones going on, hormone time, and this is normal, and they'll get through it, and they need a steady, firm and loving, supportive and demanding presence, and you can be that. If that sounds really hard for you, I recommend getting some support. Hang out with some other parents who are going through the same thing, who are trying to figure it out too, so you feel less alone with it. It's a ride, and you got to like hold on. And it's not sometimes better when you have other people on the ride with you, people that are like you consider peers, who are like-minded, who are also, riding through this and also trying to make sense of it from a compassionate, sane place, or if it's with a mentor or 2 or 3. This can also be a decent time to bring in therapy or counseling into your family, so your tween has somebody that they've established a rapport with heading into their teen years. For some families, that's really supportive too. Eterna asks, it's very difficult to get affection from Eterna's 13-year-old daughter. Is there anything I can do to help her be more affectionate? So when we think about affection, when it's genuine, it comes from a place of ease and connection. It also comes from potentially a preference for certain kinds of what we have coined love languages, right? And I wonder if you have possibly had a little blind spot for how affection is already flowing, because maybe one of the love languages that she expresses her love through isn't one that you recognize very easily. That happened to me with my stepfather, for example. No words of affection, no physical touch, very little quality time, and definitely gifts were a struggle for him. But this man loves me a mountain, and I didn't know it until I learned about acts of service being equated to all those other love languages. Then I looked back, and I was kind of blown away, actually moved to tears, thinking about how he had showed up for me, all those rides, all those ways that he had prepared, like, the house so that it would be, comfortable and easy and safe and enjoyable to be there. All those times he, kind of did his honey-do lists for both me and my mom. And even to this day, he shows up with acts of service, and to not just me, but I'm watching him, travel around the country, helping all of his nieces and nephews with projects, because that's his main love language. And I do wonder with your 13-year-old daughter if maybe you just haven't quite synced up yet on your love language. I also wonder if there are conflicts or tensions that need to be cleared to create more ease between the two of you, with teens, they can hold a grudge. And if there's something unresolved, they will withhold affection. So we want to get curious about if there's a root cause to them withholding affection that has to do with something unresolved between the two of you. Sometimes it can be helpful to lay the groundwork for a venting session where they just get to complain about anything they want. It doesn't even have to be about you. Just complain, and you're just going to listen. You're like, lay it on me, babe. I want to hear it all. Tell me everything that's bothering you. And you're not allowed to respond with anything besides, I'm so glad you shared that with me. Thank you. Is there anything else? It can kind of clear things up and clean things up. And maybe there has been something underneath it all, and she might lose it because she's been holding on to something and it's been intense inside of her. And the tension can come out with like some pretty strong language sometimes, like you always, or you never, or you're the worst, or the bad, this person is so much better. Accusations, judgments, whatever, but like allowing that to flow, if that hasn't been something that you've really opened and released between the two of you, that can be really cathartic. And I've seen that have effects with kids even as young as 9, 10. So that's something to explore. And then last but not least, rituals, like things that you insist on and it's not negotiable. Something we would do is we'd have meals. That's the classic one, family dinners, like 4 nights a week with both kids, non-negotiable. And they knew it. And even if they would like drag themselves there, they would settle in. And then about 15 minutes in, we would be able to have a decent conversation and actually connect. And this was with our 10, 11, 12-year-olds at that time. And then his older sister was 3, 4 years older. So in that same age range, we just insisted on these rituals of connection. And we made it low pressure in terms of how they showed up, but they at least needed to be physically present. So there's that. And then, like the whole idea of connecting before correcting, where you get into their world first. Like, so the venting, the regular rhythm of having, something that's a ritual of connection. Love languages can help, but there's also just this genuine curiosity of putting attention and focus on whatever they're putting their focus and attention on, whether it's their sport, it's their friends, it's their love interest, it's the show, it's this influencer, it's the hair and makeup, it's the outfits, it's, maybe they are just randomly obsessed with a culture. Like my son had a Korea phase. Like he was just so into everything Korean. I think it was K-pop was going on and was interested in learning Korean. Like, okay, like going with those interests, because there's nothing worse than hearing from a teen, you don't get it. And that is definitely tied to having less affection. The other thing you always want to watch out for is their fragile ego. Like, are there ways that either directly or indirectly, they feel like in your presence, they're going to be corrected, criticized, even condescended towards, or belittled or lectured in some way? Really got to rein that in and maybe do a little audit on your own approach to communicating with them. Teens need to be seen, felt, and heard before they will see, feel, and hear you more than at any other age. They are so about themselves. It's like 90-10, 90% about them, 10% about you. That's about how much space they have. It's not going to be 50-50, by the way. It's just not developmentally usually within reach. They have to be focusing on themselves to be developing their sense of identity and place in the world and purpose. And they're so overwhelmed. They have a lot going on internally and externally. So take the smaller wins when you get them. And I would maybe even end up reframing, what does affection mean and look like? Like, if you're thinking, oh, that would mean we'd snuggle regularly. We would regularly have like mother-daughter dates. We would spend hours together talking about things. She'd be my buddy. We'd be kind of besties. That's the exception, not the norm. I'm telling you right now. Maybe for like once a month, but not every day. That's like a huge exception. The norm is much different. So maybe that's helped you, Eterna. I hope that we've supported you with your question. As we're closing this Ask Vanessa Anything, I just want to acknowledge that we have a really diverse, but really engaged community, and I really appreciate that. And as I mentioned in many of the Ask Vanessa Anything, responses where I coach y'all, it is about a nuanced approach. And so I just want to normalize that if you're out there looking at general resources and gleaning some things, but feel like it's not quite answering your questions, don't be discouraged. By design, that advice can often be too general as a kind of a starting place, a foundation to kind of get a sense of what is your overall philosophy and approach. And it's useful for that. It can also be very method-based, where there's, I always say methods sell books. Because if you can name it and it's it's something to consider, and it might be one of the methods that you borrow from as you really find your own authentic way of how you're going to raise your kids. But I take a bold stand for each family being able to customize and at your own pace develop your authentic parenting style and your version of what support and structure looks like in your family, what your routines, your conflict resolution process, your connections, your like rituals of, daily life. That's really up to you. And it should feel real and right to you as it evolves alongside your kids. And I'm here for that. So thank you for listening and being a part of the community. And let me know, give me some love on the comments and the chat. And, feel free to like and put the hearts on and everything. Let me know if you need anything else. If you have a question, we can queue up for a future Ask Vanessa Anything. We're here for you. And some of you might be interested in checking out like a more involved and more rich and enriching experience, and be sure to indicate that that's you, as we will be ramping up into our next cohort over the next coming months. We like to know who wants to chat with us about that, so we can get you some early access to some really great resources before the next cohort starts in January. As we wrap up, remember, there's no one-size-fits-all way to parent. Keep nurturing those strong family bonds and watch resilience bloom in your community. You've got this. And if you found this episode valuable, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. You can also hop over to thecalmempoweredparent.com for current events and to grab your copy of the Calm Parent Strategy Guide. You can even learn how to bring our free and low-cost workshops to your school or community. Your support means the world to us and helps us empower more parents and children. Let's do this together.